Welcome to this Airwalk Reply podcast, The Big Questions in Tech, hosted by Hammond. Joining him are service management specialists Oliver Hibbitt and Justin Allum from Airwalk Reply. Together they tackle the big questions in service management.
Hi there, welcome back to the latest episode of Big Questions in Tech. I'm your host Hammond, and this is the second episode where we're talking about the future of service management. Hopefully you watched the first episode, so you'll know this is a really exciting topic. Previous episode we touched on kind of the importance, I guess, and context of service management, why it's really important for organisations, and the organisations that think of it strategically are probably going to have an advantage. Mm-hmm. And we touched a little bit on where things go wrong and where people are getting it wrong today, and we started to give a bit of a vision of the future. So I want to circle back around on that a little bit in terms of what does the future look like, and then how do people get there? What are the tangible steps, particularly for some of our kind of big complex clients? It's not as simple as we'll just bin what we've got and start again. It's got to be an incremental approach. So yeah, let's just touch on that. So, I mean, in terms of that vision for the future of service management, let's touch on that.
So I mean, obviously, the most important thing, where we've spoken about, obviously, in the last episode, that whole sort of tactical versus strategic thing. So having that clear vision, and that needs to be from the top down, clearly communicated, so you sort of get people on board, because obviously one of the issues we've seen with larger organizations is people are quite resistant to change, especially in larger organizations. We've got this process, it works, why are you changing it? But of course, we have that mindset, we never would have moved on. So having that clear vision and that clear strategic goal, that end goal of where we're getting to, how it aligns to current business objectives, cascading that information down, making sure it's clearly communicated. You bring people on the journey with you, and you're hoping that you're going to get them a little bit excited about that as well, because it's like here's where we can get to if we all pull together. So I think that's probably the first thing you probably need.
And obviously that needs to be aligned or part of your broader IT strategy. They should not be done in isolation. And then once you've kind of established where you want to get to, whatever that is, a 3-year plan, 5-year plan, which will continue to evolve, you have to start then picking out those kind of, where do you actually start? So, I think the phrase is kind of think big, start small. We've got our end game. What are then the sort of, what do we achieve in the first year? Then what do we achieve in this 3-month period? You've got to
show value, isn't it?
Yeah.
People won't be brought on board if you're selling them this sort of big dream, this big ideal, but you can't actually show any kind of tangible proof from the get-go. So it sort of take some baby steps. We'll show you how we can do it in a small way that shows some value, and then okay, cool, and we use that momentum to then carry on forward.
Just take back for a second that end game we talked about. So let's say there's a 3 to 5 year journey that an organisation should go on. What do we think are the kind of main tenets of that? What are the pillars for transforming service management? I mean, I would guess tooling would be one. So obviously there are platforms out there, most people have them, but it feels like actually getting those right, getting them used to the fullest extent feels like one. What are the other things do we think?
So I think there's again, we mentioned it in part one, there's a cultural shift. Service management has to be seen as you said, understanding the value. There has to be this kind of move from how it's traditionally been seen.
The strategic objective.
The strategic,
is probably one of them. Yeah, that makes sense.
That's it. Yeah, okay. And we're focusing.
Why do we exist, and what do we focus?
Yeah, that's it. And taking it like right to that top of like, again, what is the outcome we are trying to achieve, and not just saying, well, in service management we achieve the outcome by automating this process or having this process. It's like, what is the outcome, and what is the best way to achieve that across the IT organisation or the organisation as a whole, not just kind of go in service management will do this to achieve the outcome.
And I suppose if we've talked about the sort of the baby steps, and to use an actual example, some of the sort of leading sort of ITSM tools are already sort of inbuilding sort of Gen AI stuff to sort of start taking away some of those tasks. So maybe in the very near future, or some organizations may even be ready, you don't need a triage team. Gen AI has looked at it, it's built out what the ticket is, it's built out your resolution notes, it's sending summaries, it's even closing tickets for you. So these are sort of tangible things that you can do right now to get you on that journey. That's not 5 years away, that's kind of like now, but it does get you on that journey and helps gain that momentum that we were chatting about earlier.
Yeah, and it's interesting as well though, because actually what that's happening now is the development of the ITSM tooling actually almost drives some of what an organisation can achieve. So an organisation can have that vision or that strategy of like, this is where we want to be in 5 years' time. But actually it needs to understand what capability ITSM
How often,
tooling
though, do we think that
can provide. Sure.
How often do we think that organisations are maxing out the capabilities of their platform?
No,
no. I've never seen it.
No.
I think mostly organisations are limited by their use of those platforms as opposed to the capabilities of the platform. I agree we might get to that point.
Yeah,
but
I think that's the point, is that it's, this is what we want to achieve. We have this ITSM tool. How can this ITSM tool help us achieve that? So rather than kind of going, right, we're going to deploy the latest version of this tool because we need to stay current, to be supported. It's this latest of the tool, the version of the tool offers all of these features. Actually, how can we now make the best use?
How do we leverage it?
How do we leverage it? How we're paying for it? How do we make the best use of it? And building that into our strategy that says, well, actually, the tool now offers this capability. Okay, there's a bit of work there to do, but actually, that will give us this capability. It aligns to this, and in a year's time, that would be, we should be able to do that thing.
And I think organisations need to be sort of quite, not careful, but just sort of quite clear with their messaging that, okay, so now that we don't have like a triage team anymore, all those people in the triage team, we're not just gone. It's not a people thing. We discussed that in the last episode. Those people can be refocused elsewhere to deliver value elsewhere. Like, AI is not just a way to get rid of everything where every organization runs on like 3 people. That's not going to happen. There's going to be further technologies for them to get involved in. So I think, and that messaging does, because you see it a lot, and you go on LinkedIn and you see everyone like, AI is coming for your job, AI is doing this, and it's all just bluster, and you need that, and so that clear messaging obviously isn't happening in a lot of organizations.
Okay, so we rethinking the strategic purpose and objectives of what they want IT service to be around, thinking about the tooling and how do you make the most use of that to really move the needle and potentially follow the tooling. Ironically, actually, it's kind of as those capabilities develop, look at how that can transform what you're doing. It feels like automation is a big answer to a lot of this, isn't it? Is actually automate wherever possible.
Yeah,
AI might be.
But still make it outcome based, though. Don't just automate for the sake of automation.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. So then the principle around that has to be: it is not digitizing or automating an existing process necessarily. It's about what outcome you're trying to drive, and is there a better way to drive it? Maybe the process has to exist as it does today, but it could be made less manual. Yeah. Or maybe it doesn't need to exist at all. Those feel like the real key tenets that if you went out with a strategy that says those are the things that we're going to go out and maximize. In a 3 to 5 year plan, most of those things are eminently doable today, right?
Yeah.
So what would we say are the kind of, what could they do tomorrow? What are the tangible kind of steps that organisations could start taking tomorrow to start working towards that, do we think?
Talk about change management one?
I suppose it would be taking one of your existing processes, let's say change management, and actually asking that question: what's the value of what we're doing here? What's the outcome that we want to achieve? And how does this process best support the needs of the business? That's just a piece of analysis. That's just I don't know, a bunch of people in a room challenging each other in terms of what do we really need, and I think that is exactly the right thing. It's challenging the traditional view of why do we need this? Because you'll have a group of people saying, well, it provides a control. Okay, but is it the only way to provide that control?
Yeah. And at what cost?
At what cost? You could absolutely start challenging, like there is value in all of these things, but you could absolutely start challenging how that value is delivered at any point because they exist now. Then it's almost like you look at the whole kind of value stream, map it out, and kind of go, well, actually, where are we getting the value currently? But what is the cost of the value? To your point, it's like we get this value, we get perhaps more comfort as an organisation that our changes has the right level of diligence. But what's the cost of that? Well, actually, it means that we're waiting 3 months to deliver this change into production, and we miss out on a bunch of revenue or whatever benefit, customer experience, whatever it is, right? So then balance that off and go, is there a different way that we could do this to get us, a level of control we're comfortable with? Because maybe the thing is like maybe that's too much control. You don't know.
I think that specific example, you could gain more control by automating it. But by building controls into pipelines, into kind of software delivery life cycles, you can automate all of that today. It can all be done as code. Lots of organisations aren't doing it yet, and they rely on manual processes, which are inherently flawed because there's always going to be gaps and things fall through. So actually, that's the process goes away. Change management as a gate process disappears. It's just built in, isn't it?
Because you're achieving the outcome. Because again, it goes all that.
What are we trying to? Right, we want control, and we want to facilitate rapid deployment and fast, and rapid safe change is kind of the terminology, isn't it? You could do those with the technology.
And I do feel we probably should we're talking about all this AI and automation. It's probably important to touch on, you keep talking about what steps can we take today. Understanding the value and probably more importantly, understanding the cost of some of these, though, is going to be a big factor. So, companies are making all these big sustainability pledges for the environmental impact, because that is going to be a big thing, regardless of what you think. It's going to be a big thing in the next 5 to 10 years. So going out and say, right, well, we can automate all this and we can send this email here and it's going to cost this much, but actually it's going to really ramp up our AI costs because now we fully understand the AI models behind it. Because lots of organizations don't. I don't want to go into that now because that's a separate topic, but they don't. They really don't understand the value. So understanding that cost properly is going to make you more sustainable and understand where you should be maybe focusing on your AI. Like just actually, we could automate this process, but actually it doesn't really add much value. It's going to cost a lot. So actually, and at the moment, everyone's just kind of a bit blind. They're fumbling around in the dark. So I think it is something to consider.
I think another thing as well, if we think about how we link, get a real understanding of again, how critical services are to the business. What are the things that are important to the business? So you take from a regulatory point of view, important business services. How does an organisation understand what IT services support important business services? Right. So you've got that whole kind of CSDM, CMDB type mapping, which becomes very, very powerful from a service management perspective, because suddenly you understand that if this particular IT asset, whatever that happens to be, a piece of network infrastructure has a problem, you immediately understand the impact on all your kind of important business services, right? But there's a lot of work to put in to do all of that kind of mapping. So again, that's another thing where, for me, that is massively powerful. And actually, to do that at the moment, there's probably quite a lot of work. But actually, with the introduction of AI, suddenly, instead of this kind of, this perception that you need everything all in one place in order to make it accessible, AI can come along and go, doesn't matter, it can be, my data can be in 10 different places. And actually, I've got an incident that's impacting this particular asset. AI can just go away and determine what are all the things that then going to be impacted and come back with a kind of impact assessment that said, these are all the businesses that are now being impacted by this thing, But so having that model is really, really powerful. There's a lot of work that organizations have to do to map that out manually. I mean, I'm not saying that's a tomorrow, that's a thing you could do tomorrow, but actually, again, you suddenly move from this, actually, I've got to pull all this data together, but it's got to kind of all be in the same place. Well, actually, does it need to be like that? Or will it need to look like that in, a few years' time, when you can actually just sort of say, well, send something out to do that discovery as and when it's needed, rather than do the discovery, pull it all into one place.
I suppose another thing that, organizations can definitely do today, so not quite related to what you were saying, but still just investing in that sort of that training and education of your users, because if you're not learning, you're staying still, right? And if you're staying still, you're going backwards, as the sort of saying goes. So organizations can keep making sure their users are sort of fully educated on what the new technologies are. It also helps with them bring on that journey, that clear vision. It all sort of links into that. I think those are things. I mean, that's absolutely something that they can do today. There's nothing stopping that from happening, budgetary concerns, I suppose. But I mean, I think if you don't do it, you're only hamstringing yourself for the future.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think ultimately it all goes back to, if it was what can people do, what can organizations do tomorrow, where you would start with define your vision, right? Yeah. Define your vision. That's where you need to start, because all those other things that we've kind of talked about are all small pieces, small components of what achieving that vision would look like. So again, organizations without that kind of vision, everything becomes a little bit siloed. It's we're doing this because we believe it will help us achieve this, but then no idea about what the next phase of that is. So I've done this in the hope that it will allow me to achieve something else in future. But if you don't know what it is that you're trying to achieve in future, you do something and then discover it's not quite done what you need it to do.
You end up falling into incrementalism quite easily when that happens. It's how do we keep making small steps to improve this thing, as opposed to looking at the bigger picture and going, does that thing need to exist, or is it 3 new things we need? You need that strategic picture for sure. Gents, that's all I've got time for today. Really, thanks for your time. Really interesting discussion. I think as a space that's maybe not the most inspiring for Joe Bloggs on the street. I think hopefully what we proved there is actually it's quite a fundamental kind of strategic tenet for kind of modernisation of how organisations operate. So yeah, exciting times ahead, hopefully.
Yeah,
Thanks for having us.
good. Thanks very much.
Thanks for joining us. This is Big Questions in Tech with Errol Reply. We'll see you next time.
Subscribe now to never miss an episode of The Big Questions in Tech.